I want to welcome Gina Patterson and Amy Seiwert, our choreographers of Dance Series 1. Amazing. And then 4 of the fabulous artists of Smune Ballet, Terez Dean Orr, Maggie Carey, Ian Buchanan, and Tessa Barbour. All 4 of these dancers danced all 3 of these works. And I think by the end of this run, they were ready for a break. It was what an incredibly versatile, diverse program, but definitely, you know, the final push on getting you all back into your primo condition after a global pandemic. It was wonderful to see you all, you know, step up to the plate and challenge yourselves artistically, technically, in every way. So it was, you know, such a thrill to see that happen. I wanted to first mention that I have Amy Seiwert to thank for introducing me to Gina and her work nearly 10 years ago, when Amy invited Gina to participate in Sketch. Amy, what year was that? I don't remember exactly. Do you ladies?
I think 12.
Was it?
Yeah.
So now 10 years ago. And of course, Gina, this is your first time working with Smune Ballet, even though we tried valiantly to get you here. This little global pandemic got in the way. But we're so excited that we finally got this chance to present your work and also work with your husband, who had some wonderful nuggets and nuance to share with the dancers. So that was like, you know, a double pleasure there. And of course, we want to talk about your beautiful work, You Are Here, which you had been sending me samples of your work. And this work just really resonated with me. And I thought it would be a wonderful challenge and experience. I think selfishly, I probably choose the works that the dancers are going to do based on what either I might enjoy dancing, what I think would be great for them to be challenged as. If I love the music, it's something that I can sit through 20 times and say, this is just such amazing music. And Einaudi's score is certainly just gorgeous. And to have your beautiful movement set to that, that score was just fantastic. But I wanted to ask you, because unlike Amy Seiwert, who of course has worked with Smune over the years and has had a chance to get to know these artists, especially Terez Dean Orr, our senior member in her 14th season with the company. But Gina, where do you start when you come to a company for the first time and you're teaching your movement? Because yes, we all have an understanding of the classical ballet vocabulary, but when you get into the movement that you created for You Are Here, and there's really not a name for all of these steps. And where do you start when you come to a company for the first time?
Well, I use a lot of sounds. I think that replaces the names. But yeah, when first of all, I'm so thrilled to have been a part of this program and to get to know all the dancers and share the performance with Amy Seiwert. But yeah, in getting to know the company, I just start teaching the movement, and I try to, as I'm trying to teach them the actual structure of the piece, even in creation, I start with some base language that gets everybody moving together as a community, and then I really start to see who takes to it, you know, who starts, who I think might be good in this or that part. But I really take time up front, really working with the language and coaching the language and seeing who not only takes to it, but who could be coached into it. But it's not just about the movement. I look at how people hear music, how they approach things as an artist, or whether they like to be told what to do, whether they like a little bit more freedom. Because I kind of work with I try to allow all of that in a process. You know, okay, this one maybe wants counts, or this one doesn't want counts. They want to have a, you know, they want to improv a little bit or add a little bit of, especially in creation, right? And then you just kind of see who, I try to just get to know them as people, and just their sensitivity. So in teaching the language, that's, I'm also looking at who the people are. So I don't know if that helps to explain it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I guess you kind of have to see how they feel the movement and how you're communicating that.
Right. Yeah, and every piece is different, so it just depends on the experience, you know, the piece at the time. So
and how often do you make choreographic adjustments or any kind of changes, even though this was created on Cincinnati Ballet? How often do you make that to personalize it for the dancers that are now performing it?
yeah, I changed a few of the solos a little bit, and like the framework of a solo is in this amount of music. So I tried to I taught pretty much the structure, but then when I saw the bodies in the movement, tried to allow a little bit individuality. Especially, I loved having the two casts and how the different dancers, you know, just brought themselves to it, interpreted that. Yeah, I thought I would have, I think, a little bit more differences or changes to the piece. But I think this time I kept it largely the same. I changed the end of the first movement, and I think I structured all the solos, especially according to the dancers that were doing it. So.
Okay, great. Great. Thank you, Gina. Amy, let's ask you as a choreographer, and then Gina, I would love to hear your thoughts as well. These works were created a while ago, and I want to just ask you both as choreographers, have you, or how would you see your voice as changing or growing as a choreographer during this time? And do you feel like your approach to choreography has changed since these works first premiered? How was it for you to revisit these works? Amy, let's start with you.
Sure. Well, so, you know, because we've talked about it, I will say my voice has changed, I think, quite a bit, certainly since Diamonds, because that was the fall of 2008. So, you know, 15 years ago. It's the first thing I made right after I retired. It's insanely fast. I don't believe I used to move that fast, and that I asked them to move that fast, because it's fast. It's kind of crazy. Sorry, guys, you did great. But it, to me, the structure probably, I would say around 5 years later than that, 2012 is where I really started kind of trying to focus on dissolving and reforming structure. That became way more interesting to me creatively. So when I look at Diamonds, it is so straight ahead that I find the structure overly simplistic to what I would do now, and I find the speed over choreographed. So I think when you're restaging, it's interesting because you have to honor, I had to honor Amy of 15 years ago and not change everything she did, even though there's Amy now wants to. But yeah, Sel and I have talked. I was like, oh, maybe it's time to retire this ballet. I'm not sure how I feel about this ballet anymore. And I've gotten a lot of feedback from people not wanting me to retire the ballet. So that's been super sweet. And just trying to, the artist I am now, respecting the artist I was then.
So you didn't allow yourself to make changes? You just said this is the way it is, or?
There were minor ones, but nothing huge, nothing that really changed structure too much, or I think nothing that deviated from the original intention of the piece.
Okay. Okay, fair enough. I know you thought I must have been drinking a lot of coffee at that time.
I don't understand how I used to move that fast. It's insane. It's
oh,
so
come
fast.
on. You were speedy. Your Petit Allegro was always amazing. Oh, and Gina, what about you? It's been a while since you first created You Are Here, and you've been so busy since.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I definitely, as a person, have grown a lot, and an artist, and I don't know. I would say, in a lot of ways, the work is even denser sometimes. It is denser and more sparse at the same time. So I think maybe how I've changed is just how I approach the relationship with music. I think what I was working with You Are Here was the start of a lot of different things in terms of how I start work, and then how I work with music. A lot of times, just building my own rhythms, before music. Like, I think with this piece, music really dictated a lot of what was done. Um, and then a lot of times now, I'll create without music and then work to fit it in. And so, in going back to Do You Are Here, I think, in terms of in how I was teaching it, I got stuck with teaching it, okay, on this count and this count and this count, and try to bridge a little bit of how I approach it now, in phrases and musical rhythm in teaching it. So sometimes I found myself struggling with communicating the piece rather than just doing a straight, like, teaching of this movement on this count. So I was trying to blend a little bit of, like, keep a bit of a creative process, even though it was already structured and created. But I was trying to keep a creative process in the teaching of the work in order to get to know the dancers better. So, yeah, so that.
Okay. Okay, that's great. I mean, you were very communicative in terms of descriptive and what you were going for, whether it was the whoosh of the movement or
Yeah, sound effects.
sound effects. There's so many different ways. I feel like as dancers, we're not used to speaking to express ourselves. We move to express ourselves and any range of emotions. So sometimes finding the right words is a challenge. And this program certainly covered every possible emotion for our dancers. I'd love to get some input from some of our artists. Terez, let's start with you. You were an alternate when Been Through Diamonds was first performed, and you danced. It was the same role, but how do you approach that now, these many years later? You're a different artist now. Did you allow yourself to start from scratch, or did you feel like you just took it to the next level, or how did you approach it? Something like Been Through Diamonds that you had a recollection of.
Yeah, it was funny because when it was my first season with the company, I was very young, very green. And I remember Amy Seiwert and Amy London pulling me into a studio by myself for about an hour and a half to work on that solo. And I was so nervous and so excited to get this opportunity. It's, it's a prominent role in the ballet, and it's super technical and challenging. And this time around, it was kind of odd what I remembered from 15 years ago, and what my body remembered, but also to sit into the movement a little bit more and trust that I have that to develop it further and yeah, to grow it a little bit more than when I was 21. So it was a really good challenge again to do that and yeah, to see how I could take it to the next level.
Wonderful. Well, it was great to see how all of you artists, when I think back to 2 years ago when we had to suddenly shut everything down and just start back up again. And it was almost like a dancer learning how to walk again. I mean, not exactly. You all did a great job of keeping yourselves as fit as you could from your kitchens. But to finally just see you all just doing this incredibly technical work of Amy's. I mean, Amy was always such a technician, and I never got to see you dancing, Gina. And so how much of your own dancing style comes through in your choreography. But I see, of course, I remember Amy and her soubrette and all the fast things that she could do, and that we certainly saw that exhibited here, and to see the dancers reach that challenge. Well, I want to ask Tessa and Ian and Maggie, knowing so many of the artists that danced these roles originally, both in Been Through Diamonds and in Dear Miss Klein, how is it for you to then step into roles that someone else danced and fill those shoes, perhaps? Does it affect how you approach a work, whether it's different than when it's something brand new, because you know that you're creating what it is? But if there's already been a level, do you feel like you challenge yourself, or do you just make it your own? How do you approach that? Tessa, do you want to start?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, I think it's really cool to be able to watch people that you are familiar with dance a role that you're about to dive into. And it definitely sets a bar, a bare minimum. So even though, you know, we're all very different dancers, when you're watching something, you see what that individual brings to it, and you think, okay, this is where I have to start, and let's see how I can adapt my style and technique, and, you know, to bring something new to the dance. But yeah, it's a little intimidating. I got to be Terez's other part in Dear Miss Klein. And so getting to watch her on a video and have her in the room, you kind of just be like, okay, I got to do Terez proud. So it's really fun, and it creates a really cool environment.
That's great.
She killed it. You're amazing.
Yes, she did. It was great to see that. I mean, there were so many times in Been Through Diamonds when you would come forward in that entrance and I'd go, oh, wow, I'm thinking of Robin Cornwell. There you are. So fun. And Maggie, how about you? And Ian as well. But let's start with Maggie.
Yeah, in both of Amy Seiwert's pieces, I learned Erin Yarborough Powell's part, and I do remember myself kind of being hard on myself because she's a beautiful dancer, and you know, she's super whacked out, got the legs and the feet, and then I remember Seiwert being like, hey, you have that too, like stop comparing yourself. And so I think that's sometimes a hard lesson to learn when you're learning from someone that you do admire a lot. You want to look like them because it was created on them, and you kind of have to realize that yes, it is theirs, but you can make it your own as well. And one thing that was fun with Gina's piece actually is I used to dance at Cincinnati Ballet, so I knew all the people that piece was created on. And so in the couple of times that we watched videos in rehearsal, it was really cool to be like, oh, I know that person, and kind of like understand a little bit more maybe how Gina created those spots on those people, because I knew how they danced, which was kind of a fun little insight to have.
Absolutely. And shows you how small the dance world is.
Yeah.
How about you, Ian? How was it for you to dance these parts? And with Ian, I was teasing Ian and saying, you know, it's your fault for being so smart. We had him in some of these ballets learning two different parts. So really hard to change hats at times and remember which part you were dancing which night and be so proficient at it all. But nevertheless, how did you approach choreography that you've seen dancers you know doing, you know, whether it's at Smune or elsewhere? How does that impact your approach?
Yeah, I mean, I think pretty similar to my friends here with just yeah, I mean, a lot of times you admire these other dancers, and I think you definitely try to not necessarily mimic, but you want to bring at least what they're bringing to the movement, and definitely take away from what they're doing and then try to make it your own. And it's really fun to and then look at things where, like, you know, all dancers are better or good at certain things like turning or jumping, and trying to figure out like, okay, well, if I'm can't quite do it as well, or as maybe I can't jump quite as high, like how do I make it just as interesting? So just trying to like adapt and not feel like, okay, just because I can't do it exactly like them doesn't mean I can't bring something something to the dance. So yeah, it's really fun though. It's really inspiring to yeah.
Right, that makes sense. That's great. Back to our choreographers. As choreographers, and in the case of these ballets in particular, what comes first, the idea or the music? Do you have an idea and then find music that fits it? Or did you hear the music and say, this idea would fit to that? Or is it something else that what sparks what? Gina, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. Music used to start everything. I'd find an interesting piece of music, and now pretty much everything but the music starts it. Usually it's a concept and that I'm developing, or the research around it, and then I kind of, once I know what I want to talk about, or the story, even if it's abstract, I go out after and try to find the sound that tells it best, or would be best for it. So it's almost, yeah, completely swapped from when I started creating.
That's interesting. Amy, what about you?
Yeah, for me, it's usually still the music. Not always, but probably 80% of the time, and certainly with these two pieces. But I think what's interesting with both of these, Been Through Diamonds was the first time I really started to work on characterizations. Like, it wasn't an abstract idea that dancers were representing, but really, people in relationships that most anyone could understand. And it was really the first time the characterization started driving the choices that I would make creatively. And Been Through Diamonds was the first time I really attempted that. And I feel like I learned what I needed to do, or I learned how to do that in Been Through Diamonds, and then did that in Dear Miss Klein.
That's great. That's great. And that's a great segue for my next question for our artists. How is it different for you to approach an abstract work as opposed to something that has a narrative, whether it's a loose narrative, it's not, Hansel and Gretel or whatever, but there's definitely a through line happening in Been Through Diamonds, and certainly in these vignettes in Dear Miss Klein. How do you approach that? And do you have a preference? Who wants to start? Ian.
I'll give it. So
super.
I think what was really interesting with these three different pieces is they really are so different. And I think you're really kind of having to figure out, like, is the movement, is the music, is the piece asking you to express a character or express something to the audience, or are you trying to bring the audience into your world? Where, like with Gina's piece, it's very like you're kind of letting the audience into this kind of surreal experience, and you're not really trying to project out or express something specific to the audience. You're kind of like letting them see kind of this internal experience, where, with the Dear Miss Klein is much more like we are portraying not necessarily characters or anything, but you're presenting something more to the audience that is more, I think you're trying to spell it out a little bit more in terms of like what you're trying to represent and the storylines and whatnot. So it's kind of this fun, yeah. And even with the Been Through Diamonds is a similar thing of trying to figure out, am I letting the audience in, or am I trying to like go to the audience with the movement or story or what have you.
Great, thank you, Ian. Yeah, it's kind of like a peek inside, isn't it, with You're Here. Anything, Maggie or Terez, that you feel like adding to that? approaching a narrative as opposed to something a little more abstract?
Sure, I'll say something. I think, yeah, both. I don't think people would maybe have a preference one over the other. Being able to absorb a piece like Gina's and really, like Ian said, kind of internalize and pull from the verbiage and the imagery that the choreographer has given you to kind of come up with what your meaning is really beautiful. And every night it feels like you get to have a new experience with it. And so you're kind of continuing to find inspiration to pull from, or, okay, I did it this way one night and I want to try a new way. So in that sense, it's really exciting to kind of have each night be its own unique moment. And the other really cool thing about, having more of a character to play is we also might really connect with that character. And even though you're spelling it out for an audience member, it actually means something to you because this has been a small glimpse of your life in the past that you get to, revisit in a good way or have some, it might be therapeutic. So they're both just really cool ways to express.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tessa. Terez or Maggie, anything to add?
Yeah, I think just something that I tried to find with all three ballets, though they're so different, is just being hyper present on stage. And I think that helps build within a more abstract piece like Gina's, and it also builds the narrative for something like Dear Miss Klein. So yeah, it's really like honing in with that person next to you and feeling them build and grow, and really just like looking at your partner and letting each other kind of drive the force of the piece in however the piece is, going to end up. So yeah, being hyper present was something I really loved with all three.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you, Tessa. I mean, Terez. Maggie, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think also just like the way that each piece takes on its own role and the way that we perform to the audience. I found it really interesting in the way that I interacted with my partners on stage too, because like in Gina's piece, it is very internal and very, for me, it was almost very emotional. Like as soon as it started, I just felt like I was in a bubble and like I saw nothing but the people I was dancing with. And there were moments where I got to partner with Mongjun, and the way he would look at me, I was like, I've never seen you emote or project this way. And it was really beautiful. And then I danced with him in Dear Miss Klein and he just full smile. And so it's interesting how like a piece can affect the way that you basically have a conversation on stage with someone, which is really neat to kind of see different sides of your friends and the people that you work with every day. That's
beautiful. That's really beautiful. Well, all of you, I mean, it was just such an expressive, and on top of being physically exhausting, I can imagine that it was emotionally exhausting. I can remember dancing a ballet like Frankie and Johnny, and at the end of it, I felt like I'd run a marathon because you throw your emotions into it. Years ago, I remember reading this article. There was this retired opera diva that was coaching the Merilla singers at the opera. And there was this wonderful article where she talked about how she coached these dancers or these singers. And she said, you'll go through life and it's as if you carry a suitcase. And in that suitcase, you'll put in your emotions after all the different experiences you go through in your life, whether it's, a loss or some euphoric, incredible joy, or just deep sadness, or whatever the case may be. And she said, and when you go dance these roles or sing these roles, you can open that suitcase and pull those emotions. And I just saw things from all of you that I felt like you could just really sink your teeth into. And it was just incredible to see such expressiveness, including after the challenges of the pandemic and not being able to dance as a group or touch people. And that was, part of what drove our programming for this year was the opportunities to really explore, once again, working together and working with different people. Gina, I have to say, it's always kind of exciting for me as artistic director. So often Amy, London, and I will know what partnerships work really well together. But when we just let a new choreographer come in and say, who would you like to pair together? And you had some really interesting and new partnerships. And it was kind of fun to see how different dancers who have worked together in the same company, but maybe have not partnered together, and just getting used to those, new bodies, new relationships. So that was fun to watch as you staged your ballet.
Yeah, I was thinking about, I knew Maggie or I had heard Maggie and Ian partnered a lot together, but this was after the fact. And then at one point I had put them together and I was like, oh, wait a minute, let's separate you. But then in the end, you ended up partnering together anyway. Beautifully. I mean, at a certain point I did do it on purpose, but but it is always incredibly fun to see how two people relate to each other. And I find it fascinating, not even two people, multiple people, how they work together. And it's not just even physically, but artistically, emotionally, just how their energies blend or don't blend sometimes. And sometimes not blending works too. But anyway, yeah, Maggie and Ian, you were beautiful together. And yeah, Tess with Brandon and also Terez as well. And what I also loved is the dancers did an incredible job, even switching partners, right? Like Terez and Tessa shared, did the duet with the same partner, or yeah. So
Yes, with Brandon.
yeah, with Brandon, and then it becomes a completely different pas de deux depending on who's performing it. And I just always love to see that they both added their just beautiful sensibilities to it.
It was just incredible to see. And the ballet was so grueling on our men because we only have 7 men this season and the ballet requires 6. So we were in such a panic. Amy London and I, worrying that if 2 of our men went out with COVID or an injury or something, like we wouldn't be able to do the ballet, or we might have to adjust things. And so even, working with Amy Seiwert, when Brennan later hurt herself toward the end of the run, and we just got worried about, it's always in such a small company, it's the domino effect, and then it's such pressure on the dancers that are still healthy, and then you risk them getting injured. I had an interesting question that I want to pose to all of you. As an 80-year-old, I've seen and enjoyed much dance over the 60 years. All of the dance that I've seen was created by choreographers. Has a group of dancers ever worked as a team to create a dance piece? Maggie and Ian, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, last season, Ian and I choreographed a couple of pieces together, which is always interesting because I feel like both of us had very strong ideas on like the parts we really, really loved or wanted to create. And then where we were like, I have no idea what to do with this music or this section. The other one was like, oh wait, I do.
Yeah, we even choreographed something that involved 4 dancers.
You did?
Yeah.
So
it's possible.
And how did you do that process? Just an extension of what you just described, or how did you?
Yeah, that
Christmas ballet.
Yeah, it was for Christmas ballet. We we all sat down with the music and kind of split the music up. So each person kind of had chunks of music that they were responsible for. I chose all the cape choreography. That's mine. No, it was fun too, because a lot of times as choreographers, we all have a voice, and we can usually kind of express a lot of things within that voice, but it's really fun to get four voices together and see what happens. And so, yeah, it's a good time.
It just seems the challenge is that what if you don't like what your colleague is creating? There has to be a lot of give and take, I guess. You can just go with the flow. Amy, you've done a lot of, I wouldn't say you've, it's like a group getting together, but you encouraged a lot of collaboration in your process. Can you speak to that? It's not usual in the ballet world.
Yeah, no, I love collaborating. I think it takes a lot of shared language and a lot of commitment to create a shared language before you ever step into a studio together. KT Nelson from ODC, she and I made a piece together, and that it takes a lot of time also out. You don't just leave the rehearsal process and then think about it. You have to do like a download afterwards, and really kind of create a plan and keep space for one another in the process, which is interesting. Yeah, I love it. You learn so much. But I was thinking in this question specifically about the company Pilopolis, because if you look at their work, it'll say, it'll say danced by, and it'll list 5 dancers, and then it will say created by, and it will list 5 dancers. That those things were always, especially in the beginning, made in utter collaboration.
Yeah, you see that so often in modern dance. You see that
Yeah, way less
give and take, and we as dancers are so used to just, from the time you start ballet lessons, you're just told what to do and you just try to execute it. So it's a new experience. I think when we worked with Helen Pickett, it might have been the first time that the dancers were actually asked to improvise. So I don't know. I think I might have found that mildly terrifying, not being used to that in any way. Terez, how was that for you? As you how has your approach to dance changed? I mean, over the years, so much now is asked of classical dancers. I mean, from your days training at SAB and everything was like fast and precise, and then just having this, bringing in all of this contemporary movement where sometimes things are danced with the legs in parallel. And allowing that. I remember even Michael Smune watching work and saying, it may not necessarily be pretty. I mean, in ballet, we're always going for what's pretty, and that may not be what he was trying to force himself to think outside the box as well for him. But have you approached your work any differently? I mean, when I look at now the versatility that's required of the Smune dancers, how's that been for you?
Yeah, I think, training at the school, it was very much like someone else's language. And then when you become a professional, you can, find, adopt some and find your own way of speaking through movement. And I think also it's just getting comfortable with yourself, your body, who you are as a mover and artist. And yeah, it's just practice, again, with the Helen Pickett and improv. I mean, that was frightening. And then a couple years later, Amy Seiwert, also, it was more of a collaboration. And so, yeah, it just takes time to ease into it, trust yourself, trust the person in the front of the room saying, yes, I like that. No, I could live without that, and just building on that. So I think that's been really cool to establish who I am, what is my voice. And I've learned so much, and working with Amy Seiwert for all of these years, like it really is like, it just seems like we mesh well together. We're comfortable with one another. We can be honest with one another. And I think that's really what helps me to grow as a dancer and artist. So, yeah.
Well, I love that. And I think that's very true. in watching Michael all those years, I felt like, to be a good artist, you have to be fearless. And, it's hard because as artists, we judge ourselves. I'd like to ask you dancers, like, what's it like now that we have this medium where you're, watching a recorded performance of yourself? Did you all watch the performance? Terez, you didn't. What that's like? I know we're usually our own harshest critic, but I just, in watching Michael, I thought he just had to be fearless, to listen to his inner voice. And then as an artist, what you're describing, Terez, is also to have such a level of trust that it removes the fear in the room, like working with Amy, that that you can have that honest dialogue to create and to expose yourself, if you will, because you feel very vulnerable to do that in the studio and then in the bigger stage. Gina, I would love for you to speak to that.
Yeah, I was just in listening to all of this. I was thinking, I was laughing because, you brought up trust, Terez. And, well, first of all, it just made me think about the difference between resetting something and then creating. Because, yeah, I also use a lot of collaboration in the process with dancers, but also the designers and musicians and all of that. But I'm working at the University of North Carolina School of the Arts right now, and just the other day, we're talking about stuff, and it's the 7 deadly sins, so there's a lot of juicy topics in there, and we were talking about anger, and then as we went further, I was like, well, what does that look like after we've all had a group discussion? And then I was just laughing, thinking, like, as a dancer, I would have been so frightened to do what I'm asking. And I'm so glad it wasn't me, but just the, yeah, they were so brave. I think it takes a lot of courage to improv and to, basically bring your insides out and be in a vulnerable place. And it does require a lot of trust. So I think it is important setting, if you're talking about collaboration, creating a safe environment, or an environment that feels like it's okay to try new things. It's okay to just be vulnerable. So yeah, it's tricky and beautiful, so beautiful.
Thank you, Gina. That was lovely. It's so true, and I think this was one of the draws to us creating the choreography showcase, was to have this environment where the dancers could just try things out. I remember Amy Seiwert, I'm sure you had already choreographed a bunch the day Michael said to us, oh, I want you all, and Shannon Hurlbert as well, I want you to create something for the fall. It was like I had never choreographed anything, and all of a sudden he was wanting me to do something on the Palace stage in front of a full audience where critics were coming and people were paying to buy tickets. And I was so anxious. It was like such a horrible, nervous situation. And I thought, I think I'd rather have an approach where we can sort of ease the dancers into that. And the works that have come out, and last year that was an expansion of that in the pandemic. I mean, even Terez tried choreographing. I mean, Ian and Maggie created some incredible work, and then also inspired by the outdoors. And Tessa with her versatility, bringing everything from point to tapping to, I mean, it was just such a terrific opportunity. But we had another question in the chat box for anyone who feels like answering. What influenced you to become a dancer or a choreographer? Obviously, Gina and Amy, you were also dancers. So what was the inspiration to become a dancer and then now a choreographer? Amy, we haven't talked to you in a while. Can we hear what you're thinking?
I'm just thinking, I don't know if there was an inspiration because I've just always done it.
Oh, it's like breathing. It's like breathing. See, that's how Michael was.
Yeah, it's just who I am. I mean, I made my first ballet when I was 16, and I'm far past that now. So, I mean, I think I was very fortunate to have a really long career as a dancer and be influenced by so many beautiful choreographers, and then that gets in your physical muscle memory, and as well as your own voice, and then that all gets to get turned into this great, concoction that you bake and hope it's good when it all comes out.
That's great. Anyone else want to speak to that? How about our dancers? What made you start dancing? I've seen the pictures of Terez when she was itty bitty.
Yeah,
Gee, I wish I had one of those to show right now.
It's same with Amy. I mean, I feel like I was dancing out of the womb, and I was always on my tippy toes, and my parents were like, well, we'll take her to see a ballet, and we saw Cinderella, and I was just like in awe, and I had to do it. And the moment I was put in class, I just knew, like, it just all encompassing, like the best feeling ever. And that feeling has not subsided at all after all of these years. It's just the best. Yeah.
That's terrific. Tessa, what about you? You trained at the same studio that Amy London trained at in Albuquerque. But what prompted you to start?
My older sister was dancing at the time, and my mom, who's on this Zoom chat right now, hey mom, she was our pianist. So they were just always there at the studio, and I was, probably 3 or 4, and they didn't really have a whole lot of classes to offer that age. But there was one tap class that allowed a 4-year-old to come in. And so that was my first introduction to dance, was taking tap. Patent leather tap shoes with a big bow, totally remember that. And that kind of sealed the deal. I just loved making noise. And being loud, tapping in the kitchen. And getting to watch my older sister just dance, and she was absolutely beautiful. And having my mom be there too, it was a really wonderful atmosphere to be a part of. And the owner's mother at the time, who was one of the most fantastic women I've ever had the pleasure of knowing, she enticed me with pink tutus all the time, made sure that I was always around. She always wanted to make sure that I stayed a blonde. She had very strong opinions on things. But yeah, it was just, I got really lucky to be a part of a really wonderful studio.
That's so great. Ian, how was it for you as a guy in ballet? How did you what was your path like?
Yeah, so for me, it very first started off with like, it was recommended that I do some kind of physical activity to help me stay focused. And it was like karate, ballet, I don't know. So I tried ballet. And I think within like a year or so, I went and saw like Cirque du Soleil. And it like blew my mind, and I thought it was the coolest thing ever. So just the idea of like performing and being a part of surreal shows like that, I think just kind of launched me forward and like committed me to being a performer and being a dancer. So yeah, now
that's so great.
Still doing it. It's fun.
Yes, you are. You've had quite a career and had the chance to dance at several different companies, and kind of, I'm sure every place you absorb new things and new experiences that add to your plate. So we're the beneficiaries of that. Maggie, what about you?
Very similar to Tessa. My sister was enrolled in dance classes, and my mom was like, well, we're driving to the studio anyways, so sign her up too. And it was we both danced together throughout high school and college, and so it was always such a really wonderful thing to do, like with a sibling, especially an older sister who you really do look up to, like that connection to have with a family member. And I think for myself, I always just love the challenge in creativity, whether it's creating or being created on, and like just learning how much your body can do and how much your mind can take in is like, it's pretty incredible. And so when I feel like I've like, oh my gosh, I've learned so much, you just keep learning more. So I think that's, for me, like something that's always really drawn me in is that like, I'll never know everything that I can know. It's just always happening to me.
That's great. That's so true. Well, Gina, how did you make that step from a dancer to a choreographer? What made you take that leap?
Yeah, I was always dancing, like they were saying. My parents have videos of me walking on my toes, and but I was thinking back. I also would be dancing in the woods, in the trees, and perhaps that was my, first bit of creation. I don't know. I never really quite looked at it like that, but yeah, I was in Dancing with Ballet Florida, and there was a choreographic workshop for the dancers, which my now husband was directing at the time, and he had asked me if I wanted to be one of the choreographers, and I said, oh no. Several people had said, oh, you should choreograph, throughout my career. Oh no, I'm just a dancer, was always my answer. And then sort of with a little bit of a push, I was like, well, who's doing it? And there were all these guys doing it, and he said it would be nice to have a female voice. And so I said, okay, well, if they're doing it, if they can do it, I can do it. And 2 weeks out of 3 later, I was like, I can't do this. And I wanted to quit. And he said it wasn't an option. Okay. He said, so you'll just go out and talk about it. You show 2 steps if that's all you have. And so I said, that's not an option. And so I went and listened to the music and created something, and then the rest is history. I just fell in love with it ever since. So thank you, Eric.
Yay, Eric. Thank you, Eric. Well, we're a little bit over time. I want to thank all of you for joining us, both our audience and our incredible artists. We so appreciate your contributions, and then sharing about this process, which is just so incredible. I could not have been happier with the program, more proud of the artists, and just delighted, Amy and Gina, with your beautiful work, and not only that, for nourishing our dancers. So really, that's really what's so important, that our dancers be nourished and fed artistically, and that they feel they have new opportunities to stretch and explore. And this program did it all. So thank you all so much. We hope you'll join us for Dance Series 2 in the spring. We will have Amy Seiwert's Renaissance, and Tessa Barbour will be expanding one of the works that she created last year. So we're really excited. No fear. You're going to do great. So we look forward to seeing you again next time, if not in the theater, then back in Zoom land. Have a great evening, everyone. Thank you.